Coming to you from 4,200 feet in the hills of Oregon, it is time for another bonus episode of the MOA broadcast. Today's topic is going to be, as the title suggests, a bit of a spicy one. We are talking about pepper spray, and is it a good choice for self-defense, and why or why not? First off, there are a number of topics we're going to try and discuss. This is going to be around a 10 to 12 minute segment. So we're going to cover the broad strokes as opposed to getting into the deep dive science behind everything and so forth. Now, first, you probably need to look at just like any type of tool or weapon or whatever else you're going to use for self-defense, make sure you check your legality in your area. Pepper spray, as far as I know, is legally available to own and use in all 50 states here in the U.S. There are, however, some restrictions on size and a few different locations where it's regulated a little more heavily, and particularly in states like California, New York, and I think Massachusetts is a little bit more picky as well. I think one of the things in California is you can only have a 2.5 ounce size can of the pepper spray with you. So again, just like a firearm or anything else you might use for self-defense or anything else, make sure you check on legality at where you're going to be and if you're traveling and so forth. But in general, pepper spray is pretty safe to use and own in the United States. Outside of that, again, you have to do your research. Now, does it work? The short answer is yes, absolutely. Pepper spray in general is very effective on both human and small animal-sized targets. We're not going to be talking about bear spray and things like that. We're talking mainly about dogs and so forth. I've had to use pepper spray, several cans of it over the last few years where I live, because we have literally roaming packs of wild dogs. And I have been attacked multiple times while just walking my dog or walking around out here where I live and in the high desert area. So I can tell you from firsthand experience, it is very effective on dogs. Typically, they want nothing to do with it. The other interesting thing is they have a pretty good memory when it comes to getting sprayed, because I have encountered on multiple occasions dogs that I've had to, and I didn't want to do it. I like animals. I'm a big fan of dogs and cats, actually. But you got to do what you got to do. And Bacon, my dog, he's a beautiful pointer. He's a good boy. He got tore up a couple of times while being walked. And so, enough is enough. But the point I was trying to make is they remember it. When those dogs saw us coming a second time, they didn't want to stick around and chat anymore. And they weren't interested in making new friends. So that's a big plus. Now, some dogs are a little stupider and they need a little bit more learning. So that may or may not be your experience, but that has been mine. Now, what about different types of pepper spray? Before we get into that, why does pepper spray work and how does it, if you've never been exposed to it or seen it used on someone, what does it do? Basically, the oleoresin capsicum is the active ingredient, or where the ingredients are derived from. And it's from a pepper. Okay, that's why it's called pepper spray. And basically it gets concentrated and put into usually either an oil or a water vehicle to get it out there to someone. I prefer the gel. I think it's water still. It's a water vehicle, but it's in a gel form. They must put some type of emollient in there to thicken it up or something. But regardless, that gets on someone's face or eyes. And if you're going to use it, you want to get it in the mucous membranes of the eyes, nose, and mouth. Because what happens is it binds to that, and it also binds to the pain receptors in those areas, and it immediately starts to cause discomfort, swelling. You want to clench your eyes and close them, and it's involuntary. Okay, so you feel almost immediately, in most cases, if you get painted across the eyes really good, you feel almost immediately that you've gone blind. You haven't. Your eyes are just fine. You're going to recover just fine. But that blindness typically lasts for about 12 to 15, maybe 20 minutes, depending on how good you got shot across the eyes with it and your own individual, metabolism and experience and so forth, and the type of pepper spray. But it just causes basically extreme irritation. It causes difficulty in breathing. Everyone's going to start coughing, especially if you get it around, again, the face and nose area. Even if you get it across someone's chest, when it starts wafting up into the nose area, you're going to have difficulty breathing. And in general, it just causes discomfort all the way up to and including intense pain. Again, depending on how well you get the coverage and the type of pepper spray and the individual person. Now, for some reason, some people seem to be very, very unaffected by pepper spray a lot of times. Now, we're not talking about whenever drugs or alcohol are involved, because typically that will change things, and people that are intoxicated in one way or another are typically less affected by pepper spray. So keep that in mind. But by and large, the average person is affected pretty strongly by the pepper spray. And it doesn't really matter how tough you are. You can fight through the pepper spray, especially if your eyes are still working. You can fight through it depending how tough you are, I guess. But if it gets you right across the eyes and or in the nose and or mouth, it's an involuntary thing, guys. You can't just tough it out. Once it gets fully in your eyes, you're not going to be able to see. You can't tough through that. You can keep pushing and keep functioning, again, depending on your motivation and your how, tough you are. But just keep in mind that there's no shame in crime, because it's going to be a waterworks probably all the way around. And it's very common when you use pepper spray to get some backsplash, or if the wind will blow it in your face and get it back, get back into your own eyes and stuff. So be prepared to experience the effects of pepper spray anytime you deploy it. Even when you're outside and it's a non-windy day, you are going to smell it and probably at least do a little bit of coughing in most cases. That's why I also strongly recommend, if you're going to carry and use pepper spray, that you buy a can of it and go in the backyard or out in a field or wherever you feel safe, and either have somebody spray you so you can get the effects of it, or at the very least spray it on something and get it close up in your face briefly and feel the effects. That way you know what is going to happen when you deploy it. Because the good news is, once you've experienced it a time or two, it does not affect you nearly as badly. Now, you will still have the blindness and the coughing and everything else if you get a really good direct shot in the face. But what gets people in trouble a lot of times is when they experience that difficulty breathing and the coughing and the eyes are watering and their eyes are involuntarily, closing and swelling and stuff. They experience fear and then panic. And those are two very, very bad things to have happen to you or to experience while you're in a self-defense type situation. You don't want to have that go through your head. So if all right, get ready to use this, and if I get a little, I'm going to, have to squint my eyes or I may have trouble seeing, make sure you position yourself in a way that you can either maximize, or minimize the effects of that, and or be able to work through it if you're going to deploy pepper spray. So again, that's why I strongly recommend getting at least exposed to it if you're going to carry it. And that's a common thing in a lot of law enforcement and stuff. They will have them in military. Sometimes they'll have them get exposed and get sprayed so that they know what to expect. It's just like getting punched in the face, guys. The first time it happens to you, before you had it happen, you may be afraid of it. Oh, I don't want to get punched. It feels so bad. It's going to be the worst thing in the world. And then somebody punches you in the face, or maybe a couple of times, and you're like afterwards, that wasn't so bad. And then you're ready for it the next time, and you can fight through it. So I would strongly recommend that. The other thing, one of the other things you want to be mindful of is the wind. And this boils down to situational awareness. Anytime you're going to be using any type of self-defense technique or tools, is being mindful of your backdrop, being mindful of the wind, being mindful of your surroundings. And I'll illustrate it this way. There are a couple different places where I walk my dog on a regular basis, where I know there are typically these dogs that hang out and just look to go attack people. And I mean, there's not much you can do. You're sometimes going to encounter it. So when I get around those areas, or if I see a stray dog or a couple of stray dogs approaching, I'll automatically start thinking, okay, if I wind up having to jump back, if I'm on the side of the road, am I going to be jumping into traffic? We don't want to do that. Am I going to be able to pull my dog away? Is he going to be flying into traffic where we might get hit by a car? You don't want to have that. Which way is the wind blowing? And if I've got a headwind, meaning it's coming at me, then I'm not going to want to spray those dogs if they do something into a headwind, because I'm going to be wearing most of that pepper spray or get it on me and my dog. You don't want that. So you can position yourself to where, possibly you can spray them in a crosswind or something like that. Or even better, get it to where the wind is blowing directly into their face, whether it's a human or a dog, whatever. But position yourself and be thinking about that stuff before you engage, if you have the time. Sometimes you can't always, plan ahead. Sometimes things happen very quickly and very spontaneously. And that's the other thing to be prepared for, is in a self-defense situation, human or animal, it frequently happens very quickly. If you've never experienced violence like that, again, whether it's human or animal, if it's from someone who knows what they're doing, it happens very quickly. And if you're not thinking about it and or prepared, you will be caught off guard and you will be at a disadvantage. So keep that in mind. Again, that boils down to your situational awareness, and you want to be thinking about, if this happens, what am I going to do? If that happens, how am I going to counter that? That's just as important as having the right tool. You could have one of those big crowd control, like MK9 style, or whatever they call them now, the big fogger pepper sprays, and if you're not prepared and know how to use it, all that extra firepower is not going to help you. And that brings us to another point. There are different types of pepper spray. I think I mentioned earlier in the video, I may not have. I prefer the gel. So they typically have gel or liquid. And obviously both are liquids, but the liquid type typically refers to more of like a water type consistency, whereas the gel is obviously, thicker. It's going to hang better on the face and mucous membranes and so forth and be more difficult to get rid of and wipe off. The other thing I like about the gel is you typically get much better range. It's a much tighter stream than the liquid-based or the water-type consistency. So you won't be able to fog as many people. Like if you have multiple targets, for whatever reason that might be. I've had multiple dogs attacking. One time I was attacked by 3 dogs at once, or 3 or may have been 4, but regardless, it was multiple. And I happened to have a fogger type with me that day, and that was very effective. But you're going to typically get less range out of the liquid ones because it starts to disperse much more quickly and at a shorter range. Okay, the gel is going to hold it together better and give you anywhere from 10, 12, maybe 15 or 20 feet if you really know what you're doing, which again is why you want to get out there and make sure you practice this in your backyard or in a field someplace in a controlled setting. Now, one final point that I want to make, and this is if you've ever used the pepper spray and carried it, a lot of people are going to carry it and never have to deploy it, and that's great. But if you do, what can happen is you want to do maintenance on this at least once a week, at the bare minimum once a month. You're going to want to clean out that valve if you've had to use the pepper spray, because what can happen is it can kind of accumulate in there and clog it up, and when you go to hit the button, it'll hesitate for a second, and that very first second may be your most important shot where you have the best, on target or target acquisition possible. And if it's sitting there sputtering, now you may only paint them across the chest or the neck or the body if it's an animal or whatever else. So all you got to do is take, take a little, like an old toothbrush and some water and just scrub that opening real quick, and then give it a quick test shot, just a split second, just to make sure it's nice and clean, and then wipe it out again. One final thing, and this could possibly be the most important of all. If you use pepper spray, especially, this is more on humans than on dogs in my experience. On dogs, typically because of, I guess, how powerful their noses are, obviously, the instant that pepper spray gets deployed, they want to get out of there, and they don't want anything further to do with you, usually. There are some that are going to be just a little more stubborn and or stupid, but typically they get a whiff of that, they want to get out of there. With humans, though, it is not uncommon at all. In fact, it is frequently common that it's going to take anywhere from 10 to 15 seconds for that pepper spray to really get in there and start doing what it's doing. So don't think this is like Dirty Harry and you're going to paint somebody across the eyes and nose and they're going to drop in a heap. That can happen, but much, much more common is that it's going to take a few seconds. So have that as part of your plan if you have to deploy pepper spray, to give yourself 10 to 15 seconds to retreat, create distance, run, do whatever you want. But you want to give a little bit of buffer to get away from the threat, whatever it is, so that pepper spray can get in there in the nooks and crannies and start marinating and get to work and do its job. That stuff will bind to the pain receptors in the eyes and mucous membranes and be very effective for 15, 30, 40 minutes, depending on the person. But you got to give it that initial 10 to 15, sometimes 20 seconds before it usually kicks in and goes full force. So it's not going to just drop somebody instantly. Be aware of that and have that as part of your management plan for the threat. All right, folks, that's going to do today's topic and episode. And yes, pepper spray is very effective, especially when used properly. That's going to do it for us today. Stay safe out there, folks.